Most people crave excitement. Mason Caldwell would rather cherish a perfectly dull Tuesday. On this particular one, he'd finished a second cup of unsweetened Irish breakfast tea and was deciding whether the leaning tower of laundry truly required immediate attention when the landline shrieked. Mason Caldwell speaking. He braced for a robocall about extended warranties on his 15-year-old hedge trimmer. Instead, a breathless falsetto burst through the receiver. Mason. It's Clarissa Thistleton, you simply won't believe the horror unfolding on Sycamore Crescent. Clarissa Thistleton. The very name curdled Mason's stomach like expired milk. Self-appointed watchdog of Juniper Hollow Estates, Clarissa patrolled the cul-de-sac with a clipboard and the moral certainty of a televangelist. She'd once filed a 5-page complaint because Mr. Patel's award-winning geraniums were too crimson. Mason inhaled. Good morning, Clarissa. How may I help? That man, Griffin Dane. He's erecting a concrete barricade on Lot 9. A monstrosity. It violates our harmony covenant, depresses house values, insults the neighborhood's aesthetic palette. Shall I continue? Mason closed his eyes. Griffin Dane was, in fact, building a fence on Lot 9. Mason knew this intimately because Mason Caldwell was Griffin Dane, the name on his construction permit, anyway. The barricade was a tasteful mid-century breeze-block screen he'd spent weeks designing to match his slate-gray bungalow. Clarissa, he said evenly, I'm confident the fence meets every line of the bylaws. Bylaws? She hissed. I wrote the addendum on vertical obstructions. You leave me no choice, Mason. I must alert the authorities before that abomination becomes permanent. Before he could protest, the line went dead. Mason pictured Clarissa dialing 911, describing him as a rogue mason pouring quickset concrete and plotting sedition. He sighed, finished his tea, and grabbed his car keys. If he hurried, perhaps he could lay the last row of blocks before Clarissa's melodrama metastasized into a blue-light spectacle. 10 minutes later, he arrived to find Clarissa's pearl-white sedan parked diagonally across his lawn, its bumper sticker, I brake for HOA violations, glinting in the sun. Clarissa paced the sidewalk in fuchsia slingbacks, phone clamped to her ear, platinum bob whipped wild by the breeze. Yes, officer, she trilled, he's installing barbed wire and motion sensors. It looks like a prison yard. Mason stifled a laugh, his fence barely reached 4 feet. He approached, trowel in hand. Clarissa spun, eyes blazing. You. This is outrageous. Juniper Hollow is a refined enclave. Clarissa, he said, forcing politeness, the fence is code-compliant and entirely legal. She jabbed the air. We'll let law enforcement decide. They're en route. Mason breathed out slowly. Today, it seemed, would be anything but dull. Sirens always arrive faster when you prefer a delay. Mason had placed 2 more blocks when the cruiser rolled up, lights flashing but siren mercifully silent, a concession, perhaps, to the HOA's delicate sensibilities. Officer Elena Monroe, clipboard ready, stepped out with the expression of a civil servant who'd rather be anywhere else. Clarissa intercepted her. Officer. Thank goodness. He's building a fortress, barbed wire incoming. I smell anarchy. Officer Monroe's eyebrow arched. Barbed wire. Mason wiped dust from his hands. Good afternoon, officer. No wire, just decorative concrete. Permits on file. He proffered a neatly folded packet. While Monroe skimmed the documents, Clarissa craned her neck to dramatize. You can't trust his paperwork. Anyone can print a form. Monroe lowered the clipboard. These permits are genuine, Mrs. Thistleton. Fence height, setback, materials, all within county code. Clarissa's jaw twitched. Then cite him for destroying neighborhood charm. Monroe sighed. Charm isn't codified. No violation here. She turned to Mason. Mind if I note the property foreclosure? Please. Mason nodded, relief flooding. But Clarissa didn't surrender. "Officer, he's hiding something. I saw freshly disturbed soil by the rear hedge. Probably burying contraband." Mason nearly laughed, then remembered the partially dug trench he'd left covered with a tarp. Under that tarp lay the very object that had inspired the fence, a weather-beaten cedar sign he'd unearthed 2 weeks prior. Clarissa pointed dramatically. "There. Digging. Unpermitted excavation." Officer Monroe glanced at Mason. "Anything I should know?" Mason considered denying, then a mischievous idea bloomed. "Actually, officer, would you both like to see?" Curiosity trumped impatience. They followed Mason to the tarp. He whisked it aside, revealing the sign's ornate etching, "Welcome to Larkspur Glen. Historic site of the original Sunridge Naturist Camp, 1912 to 1933, Clarissa's color drained. NN Naturist?" Mason nodded gravely. "Seems Juniper Hollow once hosted free-spirited folk who believed clothing optional." Officer Monroe whistled. "That's unexpected." Mason continued, "The fence is less about privacy and more about protecting a historical relic. Imagine a tourist stumbling onto Clarissa's begonias sans trousers." Monroe stifled a grin. Clarissa sputtered. "This is obscene. Think of the property values, the children." Mason spread his hands. "Exactly why a modest screen is prudent." Officer Monroe snapped photos for her report, amused. "Permits valid, digging is within homeowner rights." "Mrs. Thistleton, there's no emergency here." Clarissa's shoulders sagged. Into her phone she muttered, "Dispatch. Cancel code red." She hung up, cheeks blazing crimson. "Mark my words, Caldwell, you haven't heard the last of this." She stalked to her sedan, tires squealing as she fled, scattering dandelion fluff like confetti. Officer Monroe shook Mason's hand. "Creative conflict resolution, sir. Good luck with your archaeology." As the cruiser departed, Mason exhaled. Round 1, Mason and the nudists, 1, Clarissa, 0. But he knew she'd regroup. Busybodies rarely conceded permanent defeat. 2 hours later Mason was buttering toast when a knock rattled his door. On the porch stood Vernon Blackwood, president of the Juniper Hollow HOA, a tall man with distinguished silver temples and a perpetual twinkle, as though he alone saw the community's absurdity. "Mason," Vernon greeted, "mind if I step in?" Mason ushered him to the kitchen. Vernon accepted tea, then leaned on the counter. "Clarissa called an emergency board session for tomorrow night. Topic: your fence, perceived obscenity, and the," he flipped open a notebook, "looming nudist uprising." Mason chuckled. "She works fast. She wants sanctions, perhaps demolition." Vernon sipped tea. "I've reviewed your permits. You're clean. But Clarissa's theatrics may sway neighbors." Mason set down his cup. "What do you suggest?" "Transparency beats rumor. Attend the session. Present documentation, maybe unveil a preservation proposal. People love history more than they hate concrete, usually." Mason nodded. "And the naturist angle?" Vernon's grin widened. "Lean in. Juniper Hollow could use an identity beyond manicured lawns." They drafted a plan, photographs, a concise history of Larkspur Glen, and a proposal to enshrine the sign behind tempered glass, shielding both artifact and sensibilities. When Vernon left, Mason felt oddly buoyant. He spent the evening crafting slides titled, "From Naturists to Neighbors, A Century of Larkspur Glen." He even found sepia postcards of cheerful 1910 sunbathers, tastefully edited with fig leaf icons for modesty. Wednesday evening, the HOA clubhouse buzzed like a beehive on espresso. Folding chairs filled with residents clutching reusable water bottles and curiosity. Clarissa sat up front, flanked by allies, her lips pinched in righteous pre-smirk. Vernon opened proceedings. Item 1, Mrs. Thistleton's concern over Mr. Caldwell's fence. He gestured to Mason. Mason connected his laptop. Slide 1, a blueprint of the fence with county approvals. Slide 2, before and after renderings showing tasteful landscaping. Murmurs of admiration rippled. Clarissa crossed her arms. Now, Mason said, why a fence at all? Next slide, the unearthed sign. Gasps. Mason recounted discovering the cedar plank, corroborated by library archives confirming Larkspur Glen Naturist Camp's tenure. A hand shot up, Mrs. Lee from Birch Court. Are you saying our subdivision was once a clothes-free retreat? Indeed, Mason smiled. A sanctuary for body-positive pioneers. Laughter. Clarissa sprang up. Irrelevant. The past mustn't dictate present property values. Mason clicked again, a real estate article showing historic quirks increasing neighborhood charm scores. Vernon added, cultural heritage can boost desirability. Mason concluded with a proposal, restore the sign, install a small informational garden, and keep the breeze block fence as protective barrier. Funding. Mason pledged labor, Vernon suggested a modest HOA beautification grant. Discussion opened. Residents voiced excitement, guided tours, local press coverage, maybe an annual Heritage Day market. Clarissa attempted fear-mongering, do we want busloads of exhibitionists? Officer Monroe, present for security, quipped, no laws breached by history lessons, ma'am. When Vernon called the vote, approve Mason's plan or issue a removal order, the tally wasn't close, 47-6 in favor. Clarissa's jaw slackened, her block evaporated. Motion passed, gavel down. Meeting adjourned amid chatter of picnic ideas and punnis souvenirs, Juniper Hollow, we've got nothing to hide. Clarissa stormed out, but not before Vernon sweetly reminded her community service bylaws could apply to frivolous emergency calls. Mason caught her glare, round 2 also his. Over the next week the breeze block wall was capped, painted soft sage, and accented with climbing jasmine. Volunteers helped Mason erect a cedar frame around the historical sign, topped with a copper roof. Local carpenter Inez Valdez engraved a plaque, Larkspur Glen Heritage Garden, celebrating freedom since 1912. Neighborhood kids painted stepping stones leading to the display, each stone bearing a word, history, courage, whimsy, community. Vernon organized a weekend unveiling. Clarissa remained conspicuously silent, though Mason caught her peering through curtains. Local blogger Tamara Tales arrived to cover the story, snapping photos of the fence's sculptural shadows and interviewing seniors who vaguely recalled whispered stories of sun-baked hippies. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that Clarissa planned legal retaliation. At HOA office hours she demanded copies of every permit. Jacob, the secretary, obliged with courteous slowness, quoting a 10-cent copy fee per page. Clarissa paid in nickels, muttering. Late Friday, Mason stepped outside to admire floodlights highlighting the sign. He spotted Clarissa on the sidewalk, hesitating. She approached, uncharacteristically subdued. I read those archives, she admitted. It's odd but fascinating. Mason nodded. Truth often is. Clarissa traced the cedar frame with a gloved finger. I suppose your wall isn't hideous. High praise, Mason teased. She managed a tight smile before retreating. Progress, Mason mused. Heritage Day dawned cloudless. Booths lined the cul-de-sac. Artisan soaps, sun hat vendors, a smoothie cart branded Bear Blends. Vernon welcomed attendees in a vintage straw boater. Mason displayed enlarged photos of early camping cabins, no people, to keep PG. At noon, Vernon tapped the mic, we honor Juniper Hollow's eclectic past and our neighbor Mason Caldwell for championing it. Applause. Mason spoke briefly, thanking volunteers, then unveiled the sign. Cameras clicked, a child asked loudly, Mom, what's a naturist? Laughter rippled, a parent answered, someone who likes sunshine a little too much. Clarissa loomed at the edge, arms folded. When Vernon invited questions, she stepped forward. Gasps. She cleared her throat. I misjudged. Mr. Caldwell, apologies for the fuss. Murmurs of surprise and approving claps. Vernon, never missing opportunity, presented Clarissa with a new role, garden docent coordinator, transforming her vigilance into constructive supervision. She hesitated, then accepted with a curt nod. The afternoon featured a tongue-in-cheek, Victorian bathing costume parade, won by Jacob in polka-dot trunks down to his shins. Even Clarissa cracked a grin. As dusk flickered, jazz trio the Breezy Bears played. Fairy lights illuminated the fence, jasmine scent mingling with barbecue. Mason felt contentment settle like warm sand. Months passed, Juniper Hollow basked in newfound camaraderie. Vernon confided to Mason beneath the changing oak leaves, I'm stepping down next quarter. Consider running for HOA president. Mason balked, citing workload, but Vernon persisted, you navigated drama with grace. We need that. Word spread, neighbors encouraged him. Clarissa, now dutiful docent, surprised Mason by delivering a petition of support signed by 60 residents. Better you than some yahoo who loathes history, she said. Election night in December, clubhouse decked in holly. Candidates spoke, Mason emphasized transparency, inclusive events, balanced enforcement. Opponent Gordon Slate, a spreadsheet zealot, proposed stricter mailbox paint codes. Ballots tallied, Mason, 78%, Gordon, 22%. Vernon passed the gavel. Immediate agenda, revise emergency call penalties, create annual grant for historical or artistic projects, establish an online suggestion portal. Clarissa chaired the new Aesthetics and Heritage Committee. Officer Monroe hosted a CPR workshop. Blogger Tamara live-streamed meetings. One mild winter weekend, vandals spray-painted smiley faces on the fence. In the past, Clarissa would have dialed 911 before sunrise. Now she convened volunteers, removed paint by noon, and installed motion sensor lanterns, not to deter history but to highlight it. Neighborhood satisfaction surveys ticked upward. Property values rose modestly, local paper praised Juniper Hollow's model blend of preservation and play. Mason reflected, conflict, when pruned, can yield community blooms. On the anniversary of Heritage Day, Mason found himself alone in the garden after guests departed. A full moon silvered the breeze blocks, jasmine vines exhaled perfume. He tucked a stray blossom behind the plaque. Footsteps approached, Clarissa, clutching 2 steaming mugs. Chamomile, she offered. They sipped in silence. Finally she spoke. Your fence saved me from myself, you know. Mason tilted his head. She continued, guarding rules felt safer than facing neighbors. The fence forced me to look over, not just at. Mason smiled. Juniper Hollow is lucky to have you, Clarissa, clipped corners and all. She chuckled softly. Don't let that go to my head. She raised her mug to the sign. To Larkspur Glen, weird history and all. They toasted. Wind rustled jasmine, motion lights bathed the cedar sign in warm glow. In that quiet, Mason realized the wall he'd built had become less a barrier and more a canvas. Where community painted curiosity, forgiveness, and a bit of mischievous pride. Some Tuesdays begin unremarkably, some end with a neighborhood transformed. As Mason locked the gate, he felt Tuesday's gentle promise, tomorrow could stay delightfully dull, or blossom into the next chapter of Juniper Hollow's colorful tale. Either way, they were ready.